That is two of our graduates. At the stewardship time, we have a slideshow with all our VPK graduates as well as high school and college. So we've got a lot more, but we wanted you to see a bit about the impact of youth ministry on them. So, because I love graduation time, it's an exciting time, I kind of was going through the internet looking for commencement speeches because I think it's interesting to see who gets invited where and what they have to say. And I came across one of Bill Gates. He spoke recently at Northern Arizona University. And in his speech, he had 5 points, and I thought they were just wonderful. The first one was, your life isn't a one-act play, which means you're going to do many things throughout your lifetime. Don't worry if you ever feel stuck because there's a whole lifetime ahead of you. In fact, he said if he had to say what was the most fulfilling thing he did, it is not Microsoft. It is actually the working in global inequalities that he's doing right now is the most rewarding thing he has ever done. Number 2, he said that you are never too smart to be confused. What he meant was that everybody has limitations. Nobody has all the answers. Just surround yourself with smart people. And that's always very good advice. Number 3, do work that solves problems. Make a difference in the world. Give back. Make a difference and make the world a better place. Number 4, don't underestimate the power of friendship. He said the friends you make in college will be your network later on, that you need to really value those friendships that you make during the college years. And then finally, he said, you are not a slacker if you cut yourself some slack. And he talked about how when he was a younger man, he said it was all about work, work, work. In fact, he admitted that he used to, from his office, would look down at the parking lot to see what cars stayed the latest and value people based on that. And he said, I had it all wrong. I hurt relationships because of that. He said, now I understand work-life balance matters. I need to pour also in the people I love. And so that's just all good advice. And you gotta understand, Bill Gates, I mean, he kind of deserves our respect. He's done some amazing things. And so he's the kind of person that you will listen to, right? That you'll take notice of what he says. So I then started thinking, well, who in the Bible has something to say to graduates? What's something that's sort of like a commencement and address? And I immediately thought about a particular group of books. In the Bible, all the books are put into certain areas. And if you don't know this, they are coupled by genres. And there's a group of books in the Old Testament that are called wisdom literature. And so I went to the wisdom literature to get some wisdom, and I went to the book of Proverbs. And I found this passage I'm going to read to you. But first you need to know, this was written to young men. It was written to young men who needed to learn how to live a life. And then this address here is reminding them of what they need to remember of what they've learned. So it seems appropriate for today. Now, back then it was a patriarchal society, so only young men were being taught. But it's appropriate today because both men and women pursue careers, right? And so this is appropriate for this service. This makes sense that we can read it. I'm going to read it to you, and you will note that on the screen, I left in the words where it says son, but when I'm reading it, I'm going to change it to child. I'm going to make it more neutral because this is words for both men and women. So I'm reading to you out of Proverbs 3, verses 1 through 12. My child, don't forget my instruction. Let your heart guard my commands, because they will help you live a long time and provide you with well-being. Don't let loyalty and faithfulness leave you, but bind them on your neck and write them on the tablet of your heart. And when you find favor and approval in the eyes of God and humanity, trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't rely on your own intelligence. Know him in all your paths and he will keep your ways straight. Don't consider yourself wise. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then your body will be healthy and your bones strengthened, and honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first of your crops. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will burst with wine. Don't reject the instructions of the Lord, my child. Don't despise his correction. The Lord loves those he corrects, just like a father who treats his child with favor. All right, those are a lot of good words, but I'm going to break them down for you because sometimes it's hard to understand some of the ancient scriptures. So the first thing this passage in Proverbs is teaching us is this: remember who you are. All right, now this would have been taught to young Jewish men, as I said, and young Jewish men would have understood there's a lot to know about being Jewish. To be Jewish, you have to eat certain foods, and you avoid certain foods. To be Jewish meant that you could work on certain days, but then there was other days where you were not allowed to lift anything, that you had to rest, take Sabbath rest. There were a lot of rules and regulations about who you could eat with and where you could go and where you could sit. There were tons of rules. And most important, God was the center of your world. He was absolutely the center and the guide to your life. And so then I have to say to you, what has been the center of your life? What have you learned from your home? And I'm saying beyond like the ethnicity or whatever your traditions are, what did your home value? What did they put an emphasis on? Was there a value put on loving God? Was there a value put on going to church or praying? If there was, I want to encourage you not to forget that. You see, when we start out and life is going really well, we don't feel much of a need for God. But I hate to say this, in everybody's life there's periodic trouble. And when there's trouble, you need this internal rudder that will help you make the right decisions. And that's where you remember who you are. It's your internal rudder, which will help guide you through all your decision making, especially when you're away from your family and you're on your own making all those decisions. You remember the ship Titanic? You know, it wasn't a very good ending there. It was a luxury ship that was created for wealthy people to be able to cross the ocean in luxury, and it was beautiful, one of the most beautiful ships ever made. And they spared no expense except on safety issues, safety features. It turns out that the rudder of that ship was 30 to 40% too small for that ship. So much so that when they saw that there was an iceberg ahead, they were going so fast, the rudder did not have the capabilities of turning the direction of the ship. And it went right into the iceberg. That's kind of how life is. Everything's fine when you're out in clear open waters, but you are periodically going to have a storm. Periodically, it's going to get a little dangerous, and you need that rudder to help you stay on course. The second thing this teaches us is to stay committed to God. Now, here's why you stay committed to God. If you don't stay committed to God, I promise you, you're going to be committed to someone or something else. If you don't serve God, you are going to serve someone or something else. If you don't worship God, you are going to worship something or something else. That is the way human beings are. And so it's important to stay committed to God so you are not doing that with other things. But here's your alternative. If you're choosing, like, I really don't want to stay committed to God, this is who you will worship. This is who you will be committed to. You could first decide that you want to worship something else, like materialism or success or power. Maybe those are the things you want to choose to worship. And that might be exciting for a while, but those are not values that can go the long haul. You may decide to make an idol. Of course, maybe metaphorically I'm saying this, but remember, an idol is something that's less than God, that you are looking to for your source and your strength. But you could make an idol. You could also trivialize God. You could not speak to him. You could ignore him. You could just pretend he's not there and go along your merry way. But the reality is, at some point, you're going to feel the need for God, the tug of your heart, and it'll be harder for you to go back and find him because you've walked away. Or finally, you can make yourself a god. And you can decide it's all about you and not about anybody else. And you're going to do exactly what you want. But again, you'll struggle with that. That won't be fulfilling. That won't give you a sense of being loved and cherished. You won't have that feeling that God is caring for you. Psalms 37:5-6 says, "Commit your ways to the Lord, trust him, and he will act and make your righteousness shine like the dawn, your justice like high noon." The third thing this passage teaches us is that we must trust God. Now, this is something we all learn at some point in our faith journey. We believe that believing in God means that we trust him, but it really doesn't. You can believe in God and not trust him. Trusting that comes with time, and you have to practice it. Trusting him when life goes wrong and when things don't look good, and you have to say, okay, I believe in God, so am I going to trust him? And it's a decision you make. And that's what this reminder is, continue to trust God. And this is very different than just being optimistic. Someone who's optimistic just kind of has this sense that things will get better. Politics will get better. Your employment situation will get better. The economy will get better. Human relationships will get better. You're just hoping for the very best. But that's different than faith. Faith is when you're believing that God is helping you. Henry Nouwen, he's a Catholic theologian, said the person of hope lives in the moment with the knowledge and trust that all of life is in good hands. Faith, trusting God, is a sense that God holds it all together. And if he's big enough to hold it together, he's big enough to help you with your life and your situation, whatever the issue is. That is trusting God. You know, all the great leaders that we know about, Abraham, Moses, Ruth, Mary, Jesus, Gandhi, Dorothy Day, all believed in God and trusted in God. They truly understood that they didn't have control, but they didn't have to fear because God held the world in his hands. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't rely on your own intelligence. Know him in all your paths, and he will keep your ways straight. The fourth thing we learn is don't be arrogant. Okay, this was kind of interesting to me. I'm older than some of you young people here, but did you know back in the 1950s that 1 in every 200 working people in America worked for General Motors? Think about that. 1 in every 200 people in the whole of the United States work for General Motors. The company's revenue equaled about 3% of the country's gross domestic product, which is huge for a single company. But 30 years later, that was all different. They were failing, and it's now considered their failure of arrogance. So I'm from Detroit. I'm from that area where all the 3 big automotives live and have their headquarters. And they said back in 1980, the belief was, we're GM, we know everything, we don't need to change. The executives were all walled off from the rest of the company behind double electronic doors to the 14th floor of GM's Detroit headquarters. They entered the building through the basement so they could come and not have any interaction with anybody else. They ate all their meals in private dining rooms, and they didn't even talk to their customers or their dealers, their dealerships. They didn't talk to them. Can you imagine how stupid that was? If there is any GM executives here, I apologize. But that's what arrogance does to us. We stop being in touch. We start thinking we know everything. And that's the temptation when you're young. You know everything. You feel that way at least. It's not really true. You don't know. None of us can ever be arrogant. And they're not the only company to do that. IBM, Sears, Roebuck, and U.S. Steel did the same thing. They weren't listening to their customers, and they all failed because of it. That's hurtful. It hurts lives. It was arrogance based on thinking you know what's best. That's what you want to avoid. You want to always have a soft heart that's open to other people and their suggestions. You always want to be a learner. Never assume you're beyond that. Romans 12:3 says, because of the grace God gave me, I say to each one of you, don't think yourself more highly than you ought to. Instead, be reasonable, since God has measured out a portion of faith to each one of you. Don't be arrogant. Be humble. God will use you. Finally, the last piece of advice from the book of Proverbs is give back. So what this meant to the young Jewish men who would have heard this originally, they understood that they were supposed to, it was an ancient teaching, that they were supposed to give 10% of all that they made. So what would they have made? They would have had a harvest, right? So 10% of their harvest would go back to God. And this was a way of helping them remember that the only reason they have a harvest is because of God's blessing. See that lack of arrogance there, this humility? It was a way of remembering that God had blessed them with the gifts and the abilities to grow, and so now they were giving back as a thank you to God. Not because God needed their harvest, but as a reminder to them. This, again, would help you stay committed to God and help you not be arrogant. And I think it's so important that we understand that we're all called to give back. We're all called to give. We're all called to be a part of society and to give back to society. Matthew 22:37 said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all of your being, and all your mind. You see, to fully love God, to be fully committed to him, to fully trust him, you got to give him every part of you. That includes your dreams, your hopes, and even your hard-earned cash. Yes, you have to give back. That's what Christians are inclined to give back. God compels us to give back. Everything you make is not just for you, it's to make the world a better place. You are called to practice mercy and justice, and you do that through your giving back. Now, of all the advice we've talked about today, I don't know if you noticed, but there were some similarities between what Bill Gates said and what the book of Proverbs said. They had two things in common. They were, don't be arrogant and make the world a better place. And both of those are so important. But I will just add to that. Stay in relationship with God. Oh my gosh, stay with him. You're going to go out, no one's going to make you get up to go to church anymore, right? They're just not going to make you. They do not know if you go to church or not. No one is going to make you pursue the things of God. You're going to have to decide now if it's worthy to you to do that. And I just want to encourage you to know that there's a really simple way to do that. Simply talk to him. Keep talking to him. When you're feeling grateful, when you're feeling happy, thank him for the blessing in your life. When you are sad, when you are frustrated, when you are lonely, when you are disappointed by life, talk to him. Talk to God. Tell him what you're feeling. Because remember, he's the one that holds you in his hands, and he will hear you, and he will not forget you, and he will help you. God loves you. And he's going down the journey with you. And he's not going to leave you. And he's not going to forsake you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.